What's up, everybody? Welcome to Culture Binge, where we feast on everything going on in the zeitgeist and digest it all for you, our wonderful listeners. My name is Jared, and joined with me today, as always, is my two co-hosts, Alec.
Hey.
And Serby.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
I would say I'm doing great.
Doing great.
I'm great.
Good to hear. So this is Culture Binge for the week of June 23rd, 2019. Want to let you guys know, if you're listening live, we are usually planning to do this on Wednesdays at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. If for whatever reason we can't make that for scheduling, we will usually do it on Friday, same time, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. We're going to try to keep it as regular as possible. But as always, we're going to go around and hear about what has been slapping in your life this week and what has been chapping your ass this week. Let's start with Serby. Serby, tell us about the week.
So what's been chapping me, I have quite a few food allergies, and this week I ate cashews, and I was very sick all week. But what is slapping my ass is I just discovered Big Little Lies on HBO, cool. So I've been watching that, and it's a little slow, but I like the scenery. I really like Carmel.
I've heard only positive things about it.
It's good.
Very cool. All right, Alec, what about you?
What slaps is a patron informed me of the existence of a thing called Games Done Quick. It is a fundraiser where people do speedruns of video games on Twitch. I think they might be doing it right now, or at least they were doing about half an hour ago. And they're raising money by doing speedruns for Doctors Without Borders, so that's cool. As far as what chaps my ass is The Office is leaving Netflix in 2021 because NBC wants it on their own stupid goddamn streaming service. And I'll just say, as a person who's generally like, obviously I'm anti-monopoly, it's bad, but I kind of wish just everything was on Netflix so I didn't have to get 18 different streaming services.
Yeah, I mean, you might just have to shell. I mean, you've seen it how many times? If it's not committed to your memory already, you might just have to shell out for the DVDs or the Blu-rays.
I might do that.
Yeah. And okay, so this week for me, what slaps is I'm reading. I've been doing a lot of reading lately. I'm reading my first book by G.K. Chesterton. I have never really read a lot of religious apologies or apologist stuff, and also a very close friend of mine who I consider to be one of the smartest people I know says that he thinks about this book every day. And I think this is the beginning of, I'm excited to read it. I'm going through it very slowly, but I'm excited to read about more religious thinkers because they are philosophers, and it's just something I've always been curious about, and I'm really excited to dive into it. What's been chapping me this week is, you know how CNN has those documentaries that are like these nostalgia documentaries? They had one about the 60s and then the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Well, now they have one. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's like VH1 I Love the 80s, but
yes,
with CNN.
But now they have one coming out called The Movies. And it cycles through images in the promo, which is actually quite well produced, on 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Exorcist, The Color Purple, Apocalypse Now, Vertigo, Barry Lyndon, Forrest Gump, Patton. This is like, it's sad to me that these, what I would at one point in my life were like religious texts of movies, are relegated to these nostalgia documentaries. I feel like when I saw that ad, I felt like Tony Soprano when he says, I feel like I came in at the end. And I feel like I came in at the end of cinema's greatness, and it makes me feel like, yeah, really hitting the nail in the coffin when CNN's doing a nostalgia documentary about, you know, cinema with a capital C. So, yeah, that's it for me.
I mean, it is dying. Or at least the movie theater experience is dying.
I mean, yeah, Jacob and I just watched Barry Lyndon. That's probably like the 30th time I've seen it. We just watched it over the weekend, and although it didn't need to be said, the first thing we said to each other when the movie was over, we looked at each other and said, this would never be made today. There's just no way. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into our first topic, and going to throw it over to you, Alec.
All right. Well, first, thank you to Dashing Rogue for donating some money. He asked $250,000 for Magical Piece of Paper. Answer is no. We're going to get to that later. But my first topic is actually about bullshit jobs. Maybe I should say BS, or corporate.
Sorry,
overlords.
It's actually on WTF Advertising.
Oh my God, I am reading the wrong thing. Sorry. So on the first episode of Culture Binge, we showed an amazing Burger King commercial with sad meals, and I feel like this is an update to that saga, and we have it. So we're not going to tell you who the brand is. This tweet went viral, so you might have seen it before. But just as you're watching it, try to figure out what this is an ad for, and then be amazed. And I think we're going to show the Brazilian version because it's a little bit shorter. It's 1 minute versus 2 minutes. But there's just only one sentence, and it will explain what it says. Can we put that up?
Any guesses, Serby?
Have you seen it? You haven't seen it.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, that was a kid peeing, which I thought was very weird.
Is it it's a food company, right?
How would you know?
No, because we were talking about Burger King. Is this like an energy commercial? Like PG&E?
Se você reparar, vai perceber que a vida está sempre te convidando a provar algo novo. E aí, o que você vai experimentar hoje?
No way.
Yeah.
Subway.
So this commercial, this Subway commercial, the ending says something, at least in the English version, something like, you've made all your choices. You've made so many choices throughout your life. Now it's just another choice or something. And the choice is to get a foot long sub, which aren't $5 anymore, as I understand. I haven't been to Subway in a long time. I stopped going when they started charging $6 because I am petty and refuse to pay more than $5. But anyway,
when I first heard about this, I thought it was a joke. I thought it had to be a joke. We actually know a guy who makes these fake commercials like that. There was one that he made a couple of years ago, actually, a guy we share our offices with named Mike Bernstein. He's a director, and he made this fake commercial for Taco Bell that went super viral. It involved like a gay couple basically living moss or whatever, and it went viral, and Taco Bell tweeted about it and stuff like that. And it was basically just his way of getting attention. And I watched this, and I literally had to go into his office and say, "There's no way you didn't make this." And he didn't. He did not make it. That's a real commercial.
Yeah, but this is a real commercial, and I guess it's from 2016, and it's from I think the Brazilian part of Subway. But yeah, I mean, it's just this whole thing that brands are, well, trying to connect with people, obviously, and trying to hawk this kind of pseudo authenticity. So with Burger King, it was all about sadness and realness and all that kind of garbage. And this is just like a sentimentality move it's almost like that movie Boyhood, but in commercial form.
Yeah.
And I don't understand.
The connection to Subway is so tenuous.
But the connection of all ads is so tenuous, right? Like, so many ads now are just random BS. Like there's the croissant, I think that was also Burger King, where the guy's just saying croissant, which really funny a bunch of times. I guess like that at least is reinforcing the word, but it has nothing to do with like.
Yeah, but at least in that scenario, we see a guy who's hungry, who's probably seeking food.
I think that the Valtrex commercials are really powerful. Like they show women kicking, like kicking and doing like ballet, like all these like squatting movements.
Yeah, at least those are like you could squat more if you took Valtrex, or like all the like heart disease medicines are like, look, you could play golf again. But I don't know. I think so many commercials now are just like random inane bullshit, and it's not necessarily always like pseudo authentic like this one is. Sometimes it's just like funny in a completely superfluous way.
I wonder if the Brazilians were connected to that. I don't know. Maybe there's a different aesthetic of commercials in Brazil. I don't know. Maybe they really search for artistic integrity and grandiose statements about life, or maybe Subway is just a holy institution in Brazil. I don't know. But yeah, that shit certainly doesn't work on me.
It could be like I know in some cultures, like life revolves around food. So maybe like they were showing this young man's journey of like having a girlfriend, she cheats on him, he has like this meltdown, so maybe it's a story of how food factors in. I don't know. I
was really hoping they would say eat fresh at the end, because that would have just been really funny.
What is I think apt is oftentimes when I find myself at White Castle at 1 a.m., I begin to question all of my life choices, so maybe that is what was happening.
Well, would you have not been questioning them if you went to Subway instead?
I think every time I go to Subway, I question why I went. Okay. I haven't gone in years, but I live in a place where I get like a bodega sandwich for $5, and it's got like a pound of shit on it, or I could pay the same for Subway, and it's gross. I hope they're not thinking about sponsoring this show.
All right, cool. Moving on. So this is the headline of the episode today. So a new survey of nearly 250,000 Americans with at least a bachelor's degree was conducted by a salary website called PayScale, and they found that 2/3 said they had a major regret about their education experience. Now, before we go any further into this, I just want to say that I'm a little bit skeptical about this. Not necessarily that their methods were inaccurate, but this seems like the kind of thing where, what is this website PayScale? It seems like, it's probably is what it says it is. It's a salary and career website, but it just seems like this is a piece of promotion for them, in which they probably see what's going on in the zeitgeist. They say to themselves, "Oh, I think a lot of people would click on a article that reinforces their frustration with education, so we're going to do this poll." I haven't really looked into the specifics, to be honest, into how the poll was conducted. But this would be like if Wisecrack decided that we are going to conduct a poll to suggest that will ultimately come to the conclusion that 75% of people experience anxiety when they look into Mark Zuckerberg's eyes. Because imagine that would probably be the result, and we know that that's something in the zeitgeist. And so some of this kind of reeks of weird self-promotion, but I do think it is something that people are thinking about.
So I think PayScale is a site where you check, like, if you think you're getting underpaid, you can go on there and see what other people are getting paid. And I think this is absolutely done self-promotionally, but I think I'm skeptical. Like, obviously, you always want to look at the methods and is there a selection bias of people using the website? However, I wouldn't go so far as to say or to assume that they fabricated it for a headline, because also there's some surprising stuff in there. But I think regardless of the percentage of people who regret their degrees, I mean, I think all of us probably know people who do, and I think that is maybe the interesting discussion to have.
Well, so the number one regret was student loans, which about 1 in 4 grads say they regretted, and the loan number is now up to 1.5 trillion. The second biggest regret was studying the humanities. Now, our brand is largely based on studying the humanities and appreciating the humanities. And you got a humanities education, right, Alec? What about you, Serby?
Yeah, poli-sci and English.
And do you guys regret your degrees?
Serby, you first.
I don't regret my degrees. I think there's a lot of value in a college education. I don't think it's for everyone. I regret going to business school and that $100,000 price tag. But I think I wouldn't do anything differently. I really liked learning about international relations and political science, and I liked learning about English and things. I think I would have been more strategic about like career choices. So not just like go into something that I enjoyed. I would have thought a little bit more about what I wanted to do afterwards.
If you had a younger cousin, what would you tell them to study? If they came to you saying that they wanted to similarly study English or study business, would you talk them out of it? What would you say?
I would say, so I work in technology, so I would say that it would be important to have an interdisciplinary major. So maybe something that combines design and technology. There's always value in the humanities. I think it does expand one's mind and exposes you to different viewpoints. So maybe get a minor in something like that. I also think that it's important to like look at the end goal, and that's what I tell my younger cousins. If you want to go to medical school or to business school or something, you don't always have to major in biology or chemistry or business. You can major in something else. I have a cousin who wants to go to either medical school or veterinary school, and she's majoring in art, and she's taking all of the prerequisites for med school. So I think I would say that it's always good to have an interdisciplinary background, but I think there's value in technology and business because it's can be applied to so many different areas.
And where did you get your undergrad degree? Or you only have undergrad degrees, right?
I have an undergrad and a graduate degree.
Oh, okay.
An MBA.
Yeah.
Okay. And what were the schools, if you don't mind me asking?
Now people can stalk Serby.
Oh, I mean, that's not what I was thinking, but I mean, I can volunteer. The reason why I'm asking, I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation. The reason why I'm asking is I went to a public school. I went to UT Austin. I don't have any graduate degrees, but when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I was obsessed with going to USC. I thought that was my destiny. You know, I looked at George Lucas and Robert Zemeckis and all these famous film directors, and I said, I want to follow in their footsteps. USC has the #1 film school in America. That's where I need to be. And I am so grateful that I did not go there, simply because I would be up to my neck in debt right now. And I guess that's why I'm asking if there's any regret to the actual institution that you went to. Did you wish you paid more, less for your education? That's kind of where I'm going with this.
So I went to a private liberal arts college for undergrad, and I got into USC, but I decided not to go. And that is my regret, that I didn't go to USC. I know that it was far more expensive. I paid quite a bit of money for my family did, but it was expensive. But I think at the time I didn't want to go to USC because I thought the price tag was just so exorbitant and I didn't see the value in it. Knowing what I know now with the Trojan Network and other opportunities that brand name gives you, I would have gone there. Also, I would have gone to other schools as well. I would have applied to like Stanford or Berkeley or some of these other schools. I really like the school that I went to, but I see the impact of it now when I'm in the workforce.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the Trojan Network, and I think that is the big takeaway, at least from my education, of where the value is. It really is in who you know, but also if you're trying to do something creative, it's all about creating those creative collaborations and having a network of people that you can reach out to work on stuff with. So that's why I will probably never go to any kind of a creative grad school, whether it's film grad school or something like that, because it's not about the education. You can educate yourself just by doing these projects. It's all about finding that network, and there's cheaper ways to find a network, basically. But what about your experience, Alec?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a weird person to ask because, I studied, my degree says politics, but it's like political philosophy. I think outside of people who take that degree and then go to grad school and become professors, I might be the only person using my degree, actually, because I work for Wisecrack and I get to write about all the philosophers I read. So in that sense, like, I'm perfectly content with my degree. I really like my job and I use it. But, I have friends who studied philosophy or sociology or things like that and are, project coordinators or working in marketing and things that are completely unrelated. And I think it's important there's like two components to this. There's the professional aspect, and I'll talk about that in a second. But also because the debt is such a huge problem, I think the financial aspect of the degree becomes an issue, right? Like, why did I study English and now I'm in $200,000 worth of debt? But I think if that were not the case, I mean, like, I would value, even if I wasn't using my degree, like just the value of studying something, whether it's, economics or history or English or any of those things. Like, I really think that having like a population of people who think critically and like, read a lot of books is just good for the world, and not in a prescriptive sense. Like, even if you spent your entire time like reading 2,000-year-old books, I think that helps humanity. But just to bring it back to the professional side, I think I disagree. I think the weird thing about college is that you're often paying for the networking, and I don't think you can get it outside of college. And I think a good example is not only because you build friendships with people that theoretically last a lifetime, where going to some mixer when you're 30 years old doesn't quite do the same thing. But I think the other problem is just that you are in a place where, like, for instance, I went to school in New York City. I, at the time, wanted to work in politics. And what going to college opened me up is not only other people worked in politics, there were professors who knew people who worked in politics, who were on the mailing list for people who were hiring, but also just that, I interned for a congressperson. I interned for a person who's now mayor. And I don't want to go back there, but I'm saying, like, those are immensely valuable. And what allowed me to do that is to say, like, oh, I go to this private university, or just that I go to this university and people who go there are allegedly smart. At least that was the thing. And then from there, like, after graduating, if I wanted to continue working in politics, which I didn't, that piece of paper is there. I think the other thing that, even if people regret their degrees for work, the catch-22 is, you may have gotten a degree in history and now you're doing marketing or something that has nothing to do with your degree, but people won't even interview you unless you have the piece of paper. So I think it's hard to say that the degree is a actual waste, because you would probably just not be able to get any job without it unless it was, you went to trade school or something like that. Now I think that's bullshit for obvious reasons, but yeah, I think it's kind of complicated and weird, and yeah.
It is complicated. I don't want to give off the sense that I regret my education. I mean, my education at UT was the reason why I fell in love with the humanities and why I was interested in studying philosophy, even though I was there for film school. So it was extremely valuable to me. My thing about education, just having left college and started a business and tried to exist in the real world, is that I don't think education, at least when people give advice about how much college you should go to, what college you should go to, I don't think it should be as class agnostic as it is. And what I mean by that is that if somebody emailed me, and we've gotten emails, Alec, of people saying, hey, thanks, I love your channel so much, now I'm going to study philosophy. To that person, I would
Which is always super scary. Super scary.
Exactly. To that person, I would say, if your parents are in a good financial situation and you have a good relationship with your parents, do it. Otherwise, I don't really feel comfortable telling you to.
Well, you could get there's scholarships, right? Like I wouldn't want to say I wouldn't want to. I mean, there are people who can't go to college and they can't afford it, but also there are times, and I was kind of in a situation where if you don't have a lot of money, there are opportunities to get not only like federal aid, but also scholarships and things like that. So as someone who my family did not have a lot of money, I have friends who were probably better off who have more debt in the long run because their parents, and that's not true. That's not universally that like, all the poor kids are soaking up all the money and getting out more ahead. But
If those opportunities are available to you, then absolutely. Then if you can have someone alleviate the financial burden, then you obviously should take that opportunity. But don't take $250,000 of loan and be in debt until you're 60 for a philosophy degree. Don't do it.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's one thing we don't discuss enough is like, what can you do with these majors after you have them? For example, I know a friend who studied psychology because she was really interested in it, but she didn't.
Paid major, by the way.
Right. And she didn't look into what career paths were available after graduation. And she didn't want to become a psychologist. She discovered that becoming a professor was extremely difficult. So she has this major that doesn't help her land a job anywhere else. So she had to go back to school and get another degree. So I think that's something that we need to study more, or maybe provide more guidance in high school to help people figure out what they're interested in, what their passions are, and help them sort of be future focused. Like, what happens once you get this degree? Would you be interested in this kind of career?
But do you think people ever know? And an example I would use, well, first of all, it's hard to say. When I was 17 years old, I think what I did like is I liked, the Daily Show and politics. I was like, let me study political science. I went to school and took, more philosophy-oriented classes and joined the debate team where you did a lot of philosophy stuff and really fell in love with it. But Jared and I know someone who's done some writing for Wisecrack who just got a PhD and I think halfway through realized that she does not want to exist in academia, so is going to try to find a job doing something completely different. So I'm saying, like, if this person, I don't even know how old they are, 26, 27, didn't know until the middle of a graduate degree that they didn't want to be a professor, how can we have any hope for 17-year-olds?
True.
I agree with that, but I think that we could have some sort of guidance so that this way you can, at least some people can escape that spiral and waste time. I was on a track to go to law school, and once I got in and I deferred for a year and then worked at a law firm, I realized I hated actual work of law. So I think if I had more exposure to that when I was younger, I wouldn't have pursued that so intensely.
Yeah, I want to move on. We've got other stuff to talk about, but the last thing I'll say that is if you are planning on studying something in the humanities, double major, get some sort of backup because, look, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here because I only studied film and I took that shot to come to, move to Hollywood and try to make something. And so I'm glad that I did it. But at the same time, there's so much luck involved with that. There's a multiverse out there where I'm still driving Uber every day. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that there are a lot of people who are caught up in the anxiety of the gig economy that perhaps wish that they had a steadier gig. But I don't know. So that's my spiel. We got the next thing is Serbies. Serbies, tell us about millennials having less sex.
Here's some recent research on young people having sex. Millennials and Gen Z are having less sex with fewer people than their parents did at the same age. 1 in 8 British 26-year-olds is still a virgin, and 1/3 of American men aged 18 to 29 didn't have sex once in all of 2018. So what's causing this? Well, according to an article on Medium, smartphone addiction, access to porn, economic pressure, a decline in social skills, and dating apps have all played a role in the decline of sexual activity among young people. So the idea is that with the rise in technology, we have less face-to-face interaction, and we're under more pressure We're struggling with staggering student loan debt. We're constantly trying to progress our career after coming out of a recession. Some of us have bullshit jobs with terrible work-life balance, and there's no time or money to go on dates. I mostly agree with this article and the writer's conclusions. I think it's a difficult time for young people and younger generations, and we have so many battles to fight on different fronts that it's difficult to make time for sexual activity. And when I think back about my friends who are in relationships and who aren't, the ones who are in relationships were ones that were fortunate to find their significant others in college or in grad school. And those who didn't, they deal with thoughts of, oh, I don't have time to date, I'm too busy working, or I don't have the money to go out on dates, or I just don't feel like I have that headspace. I still live at home, or I still don't know what I'm doing with my life. How can I be with somebody? So what is your experience or what are your thoughts on this?
Can you list again the things? So one of them was dating apps. One of them was technology, people addicted to their phones. Yeah.
Access to porn.
Okay.
Economic pressure, a decline in social skills, and dating apps.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in each one of those.
So I read that Medium article as well, and the author doesn't give a ton of like great. They're kind of, I think they're better to think about speculations. Like these are maybe suspected. I wouldn't want someone to listen to this and be like, yeah, people are watching porn, that's why it's happening. There's a very long article in The Atlantic from a year ago that I read like half of, that kind of talks about similar things. But sorry, Jared, you go ahead.
Well, I think we could just probably pick either one of these or a couple of these and just kind of break it down. But the one I think that is interesting to talk about is dating apps, because, well, we talked about it a little bit last week. But also on the surface, you would imagine that dating apps are allowing increased interactivity. I mean, basically, a dating app is a bar that you're in 24/7 with a cheat sheet that tells you what these people are into. So why aren't people having more sex?
Well, according to the article, it's because if you're an average-looking man or woman, you still struggle to meet people. So even if you're exposed to more individuals, those individuals are still not. They still may not be interested in you.
Is it also like a paralysis of choice? If you have infinite guys or women to choose from, then, why would you ever settle? There's always going to be somebody better looking or who's more into the stuff that you are, who makes more money, whatever.
What I found most compelling, like the dating apps were kind of a symptom of like how stressful it is and how people would essentially, like more and more people today are super anxious or have like even anxiety disorders. I feel like this is every single person who lives in New York. I don't know about LA. Maybe they're too busy on their kale diet to experience anxiety. But so like meeting people, like even just interacting with people is stressful. And then you've got like Tinder, which is even more stressful. So my guess is, and maybe I'm not the right person to hypothesize about this, is that it's just like a fucking grind. And as Serby said, people are too busy with their jobs. The Atlantic article mentions people in Japan who have been experiencing this longer. And there's a weird technological thing happening there where like essentially, like, what's the right word? Devices that can help you whack it aren't even simulating sex. Like they're not necessarily making better blow-up dolls to simulate sex. But are instead like enhancing the masturbation experience itself. So like there's a cafe where dudes go to have women watch them whack it. And the point the author made was that like even like feigned physical intimacy is too stressful. They would rather do their own thing, but make that better.
So as far as smartphones, the thing that I find is interesting about this is that it doesn't even have to be necessarily, let's say you're in a relationship. It's not even necessarily that, oh, I don't want to have sex because I would rather look at my phone. It's rather that there's this ever-present anxiety because you can always be on the phone or you're aware. It used to be that when you got home from work, there wasn't even any possibility to be tethered to the outside world or the infinite expanses of the internet. But now that it's always just there in the next room, in a drawer, wherever it is, you can always, you are in a sense existing in that network. And it's really hard to focus on the person in front of you when there's that possibility. But The one here that I don't understand at all is porn. What are they saying? That people would be more incentivized to find a partner if it wasn't for pornography? I don't buy that at all. I think that people who watch porn are just as incentivized as ever to find a partner, and it's still hard.
Yeah, the Atlantic article throws a little bit of skepticism towards that, although there was one, maybe sex therapist or psychologist, who said it takes the edge off your desire, so maybe you're a little less motivated.
I don't buy that.
But yeah, no, I don't necessarily buy it either. Yeah, I think that's probably the worst explanation. I think it's been a scapegoat for a long time that, according to the Atlantic, there's not a lot of science backing up the claims being made against it. Serby?
Yeah, I mean...
I agree. I don't think access to porn is a contributing factor in the decline of sexual activity among millennials and Gen Z. But I do agree with these other, not so much dating apps, but the social skills, economic pressure, and smartphone addiction, but not exactly smartphone addiction, but more that we're more interested in technology, and people maybe find that sort of intimacy or human connection through like apps and texting and things like that.
Do you think boomers were hornier essentially because they would graduate from college with no debt? They would show up at some place and just get a job for life where they could support, a big family with a single income. And they're just like, great, everything's taken care of. Now I have time to be horny.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
100%.
if you have nothing else to do, like, bang it out.
100%. Absolutely. All right, cool. Let's move on to the next one. Alec, you've got the rise of bullshit jobs.
Yeah, sorry.
Coming from two people who work for a YouTube channel. So please go on, sir.
I think a bullshit job will not be quite what you think it is. So
Okay, cool.
I just read this great book. Highly recommend it. It's called Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, where he essentially, so there was a few surveys. Let me just pull that up real quick. So the one he mentions a lot, there's a survey of British workers that found 37% thought their jobs were, quote, utterly useless. There was a Harvard Business Review survey that I found elsewhere, although he might mention the book, that found half of the 12,000 people polled felt their job had, quote, no meaning and significance. So what happened was he wrote an article kind of posing this question, and then got so much mail about people professing about their bullshit jobs that he wrote a book about it. And it's really great because he kind of mixes stories of people's jobs with like actual analysis, and takes all the letters he has and like puts it into 5 different kinds of camp. But I don't know. Do you think I should define a bullshit job, or ask you first? What have either of you had bullshit jobs, and then we can argue about whether or not they're actually bullshit.
Sure, let's start there. I'll go first. What I would imagine he's defining as a bullshit job, I don't know. On the one hand, it could be like, stockbroker, because you're not making anything. But on the other hand, it could also be something like social media manager, because you're just tweeting all day. As far as me having bullshit jobs, I mean, I don't think I used to work in the food service industry once. I don't think that's a bullshit job. I once had a job where I was building a website for somebody who sold toy products. I don't think that's a bullshit job. I don't think I've had a bullshit job other than YouTube.
I don't think YouTube, and not because I work for YouTube. Well, not YouTube proper, but I don't think it is. But before we get into that, Serby, have you had a bullshit job?
I have. I worked at this law firm, and one of the partners wanted to leave. So what he did, and I didn't realize this until afterwards. So what he did was he had me go through every law firm, like within like 100 miles, and get the email addresses and phone numbers of like every single like managing partner. And I put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and he basically was going to use that to apply for another job, and I got paid $15 an hour to collect email addresses and phone numbers. So I find that kind of stupid.
Now, if you were to ask me if I have ever had any bullshit internships, plenty.
Oh yeah. So I don't think I've had a pure bullshit job, but I've had jobs that entail like levels of. So you can also have a job that's like 10% real work and 90% bullshit. But I'll get into that in a second. I'll just start with a great example he gives. It's like it's a subcontractor that subcontracted from multiple private companies, like subcontracting to the subcontractor to the subcontractor that worked for the German military. And what happened was the person gives the example of if someone is in a barracks in the German military and wants to move down the hall to the other room, they send it to like this private company that then like approves it, who sends it to another company below them. I should put my hand there. That sends it to another company. And this person was all the way at the bottom who did logistics, and they had to drive several hours to go pick up a computer that was the person's computer, have somebody else box it up, but then like write on a piece of paper that was boxed up properly. Then someone else would move it to the other room down the hall, and then somebody else would unbox it, and he would write on a piece of paper that it's been unboxed properly and it got to its location. And I think that is the best example because he's spending multiple hours to just verify that something happened that somebody could have done there. But here's David Graeber's definition. He says, a bullshit job is a form of paid employment that is so completely pointless, unnecessary, or pernicious that even the employee cannot justify its existence, even though, as part of the conditions of employment, the employee feels obliged to pretend that this is not the case. So it's also important to note that it's different than a shit job. So, Serby, yours could be bullshit, but it could also be just shit, right? Like a shit job, I think a great example is shoveling shit. Somebody needs to shovel it. Can't be there. Or like, cleaning up public restrooms. Somebody's got to do it. That's a crappy job, but it needs to be done. Right. And so I think I've had, I used to do writing for, I'll just say a corporate entity, and I would write blogs that were ghostwritten for other people. And the whole point was so that the salesmen could claim to their clients that they're like these thought leaders. But the clients wouldn't read them and nobody else would read them. And sometimes I would write things about the clients so they could say, hey, I wrote a thing about you, but nobody ever read them. But I got paid pretty well. Like it was awesome. And that is like a bullshit job to the T.
So it sounds like bullshit jobs
like
are just
job.
Unnecessary middlemen.
Yeah, unnecessary, but not only that. And so there's like there's a taxonomy of BS jobs, which also I love about this job. There's flunkies, who are people who often exist to make their managers look important. So like a manager needs to exist their own management position by saying that they supervise 20 people, but none of them are necessary.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I may, all Hollywood assistants, other than just taking calls, they're really there to optimize drama just to make their boss look more important.
Oh, he mentions Hollywood a lot. He says development work is the biggest BS, or one of the biggest BS jobs.
You're just a professional coffee meeting person, and maybe after 700 cups of coffee, maybe you convince an actor to take a role. It's wild.
And he says the people on the other end of development, they never want to say yes to anything because if it fails, they'll get in trouble. But they don't want to say no because if it gets sold to somebody else, then they'll be like, why didn't you pick that up when you had the opportunity? So instead, they'll just infinitely delay these. They might like option it or something, but try to infinitely delay it to preclude anything from ever actually happening. But that's flunkies. Flunkies is that. Then there's goons, which is kind of like a corporate one-upmanship, like PR firms are a good example of this. So like Oxford University, he says, has like a PR department, but they only need a PR department because Yale has one and they need to be better than Yale. So there's that. Then there's duct tapers who just fix weird, dumb inefficiencies that exist. And then the other two are taskmasters who make up BS work for other people to do. And the one I love is box tickers, which are people who essentially fill out paperwork to prove that work is being done when it often actually isn't being done. And I feel like I've had that job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, once again, I've had plenty of internships like that. I've been fortunate enough to where all the actual paid jobs I've had have been pretty solid, but that sounds pretty interesting. All right, should we move on, or you got more to say?
Let me just...
Yeah.
Well, so I'll just say the last interesting thing about this that I really like is that it's completely... So people might say this is associated with the government because government's inefficient. But he says these jobs exist in the government, but it exists in the private sphere too. And he says the reason no one will admit that bullshit jobs are a problem is because the narrative is that like capitalism and the market economies reduce inefficiencies, like market pressures would have people downsizing any useless, pointless jobs. But this is happening, but because we've convinced ourselves of that, we're unwilling to grapple with that fact, which I find very interesting.
Interesting. Cool. All right, I want to try out a new segment on you guys. So this segment is called Brilliant or Insane, where I'm going to tell you about some extremely eccentric figures in the art world, in the world of politics, in the world of movies, and it's up to you guys to discern if this person is in fact brilliant or insane. So today I want to talk about a film project called Dow. Alec and Serby, have you heard of a film called Dow?
No.
Not until you mentioned that you're going to talk about it.
Okay, but I haven't told you exactly what it is. So let me tell you a little story about a film called Dow. It has been called the Stalinist Truman Show. So Dow is a film made by a guy named Ilya Kurjanovsky. I'm probably fucking that up. So it was originally meant to be an epic biopic about the Nobel Prize-winning Soviet physicist Lev Landau, who was famous not only for advancing quantum mechanics, but also for being a notorious ladies' man. Now, this movie was being shot on the outskirts of Kharkov, Ukraine. Now, in that, so this guy, Kurjanovsky, is a native of Moscow's cultural elite. He's basically the son of a Russian billionaire, and he basically rented out half the town. He rented out half the town and turned it into what is now called the Institute. So this film was filmed for 5 continuous years in a built-to-scale working model of a 1950s Soviet-era city. There's a main square with monuments, apartments, a stadium, a working cafeteria, a working barbershop. He insisted that his cast and crew live full-time on the increasingly large and elaborate set, completely cut off from the outside world. The director forced the cast and crew to dress in Stalin-era clothes. 1950s refrigerators were stocked with 1950s food, stamped with 1950s expiration dates. Even the bathroom pipes were custom-made to be the width of 1950s plumbing. Once again, the set was called the Institute, and it was the largest film set in Europe, an area totaling 12,000 square meters, which is roughly the size of 2 football fields. Jacob, I think we have some images if you want to put those up. There was no traditional movie equipment in sight. Instead, there were hidden cameras everywhere. You could film through holes in walls. You could film through holes in ceilings. There were hidden microphones and lighting fixtures that there would actually be in Stalin-era Russia. Their function was to create a working totalitarian surveillance society. There are even cops that patrol the city to make sure that you don't use modern words, because if you did, they'd take it out of your salary. And one of the creepiest things is that the cameras aren't always rolling. In fact, for months at a time, the director doesn't even direct. People are just living their lives, despite if the movie's being made or not. Their roles become their real lives. Now, this went on for 5 years, and people had a tendency to get obsessed. People moved their whole families there. Others abandoned their families to live on the set. People abandoned their careers to be part of the Institute. People got married on the set. Babies were born on the set. Apparently, one of the associate producers named Sveta reportedly started out as a reporter to cover the project, but she became so enthralled with it that she left her husband and joined the project. And the director, Kurjanovsky, essentially ruled like a king. It was called a totalitarian and psychologically oppressive set, some people claiming they had PTSD from it. It's also said that he was a ladies' man and there were some ethics violations into how he treated some of the women that worked under him. The production was originally planned to last 7 weeks. It dragged on from 2006 to 2011. The world premiere of the movie was supposed to take place at the 2012 Cannes Film Festival, but didn't happen. It was supposed to happen again at Cannes in 2014, didn't happen. But in January of this year, Dow was finally released, sort of. Instead of 1 feature film, the Dow project turned into 13 feature films and a museum exhibit featuring stills and archived footage from the experiment, including some. If you guys are watching the stream, these images are stills from one of the from the 13 movies. So some of the stuff that you can look at is unsimulated sex scenes. They had it in their contract to where the director could literally turn a camera on and just watch 2 people living there have sex, and it's all part of this experiment. So the films and exhibit ran in Paris in February. They've also created a TV series, and they're creating a digital platform called Dow Digital to view these things. One more element before I open it up. So in this exhibit, which ran in February, you have to apply for a visa through Dow's online portal and fill out a confidential questionnaire about your psychological, moral, and sexual history. And respondents have to ask yes or no to questions such as, or these are statements you have to answer yes and no to, one of which, 1, I've been in a relationship with an imbalance of power. 2, in the right situation, everyone could have the capacity to kill. 3, illegal forms of sex can be right for some. So this is the project, one of the weirdest film projects ever. And my question to you, and I know that we haven't seen the movies, so it's a little bit hard to tell, but just from how I've described it, would you say that this is brilliant or insane? And keep in mind, this is the son of a Russian billionaire. What else is he going to do with the money?
Wow. Serby, you wanna go?
This is so insane.
Yeah.
I mean, part of me, like, I was kind of interested because where else would you find such an immersive experience? And
Yeah.
isn't there something called method acting? Like, I feel like this is method acting on another level.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like intrigued, and at first I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind going on that set and like pretending like I'm in the 1950s because I'm obsessed with like the 50s and stuff. But I don't know. Like, the whole thing is weird. Like, you can watch people have sex. The cameras weren't rolling. I think it would be interesting if there were psychologists there to sort of see, like, how people would live their lives, like, if there were any interesting insights to derive. But it's just nuts. I think it's weird.
John Haymaker in the chat says this is brilliant and insane. I think I agree. The thing I like about this, and it's, if you were to say, all right, how do I capture Stalin-era Russia? I think that a smart answer to that would be, well, we have to set up a totalitarian surveillance society, because how else would we really get the authentic experience of people being scared that they're always watching? So the only way we can do it is to create a small town in which we essentially just do the experiment. And now, granted,
I feel like it's cheating though if you like the people in it don't have the threat of getting sent to a gulag over them.
True.
That's true.
But he is the son of a Russian billionaire. Maybe they still have that ability. He could probably make people disappear.
Yeah. Emily Bronhart says this is unbelievable. Yeah, there was a GQ article written, which is where I got most of this information, written in 2011, and the project was in Paris for like a month this year, and I think the movies are going to come out at some point. There are 13 of them, and yes, someone else said that it seems like a cult. It basically was. It basically was.
To me, I find it a little hard to answer if it's brilliant or insane, but instead it's like, not that this is being done ironically, but the thing about doing things ironically is like, when is it actually, I mention this all the time. There's the Onion article about the hipster who thinks it'd be funny to wear a suit ironically, but nobody gets it. So he gets a job ironically, but nobody gets that. So he has a family ironically. Mm-hmm. And then he's just a dude who has a family who's like a square. And this is that, not that he's trying to ironically run a totalitarian government, but it's like, I'm trying to recreate it for art purposes. But at what point is he just like Stalin?
I have two questions.
Well, you said yourself that he's not going to the gulag. They're not sending people to the gulag. So that is a big differentiator between him and Stalin.
I mean, Stalin did a lot more than...
I know, but I'm saying that's an important differentiator. And what were you going to say, Serby?
I have two questions. One, how come I didn't hear about any of this over the 5-year period that they were filming? So was it secret, or was this just not well known, or maybe I just live in a box?
I think the GQ article that came out in 2010 or 11 was pretty well circulated, but for the most part, since 2011, it's just been, I guess, a tortured artist in the post-production room saying, what do I do with this? Is it one movie? Is it 13 movies? Is it just a museum exhibit? So it's kind of old, and it's also in a very remote part of the Ukraine, which is, I guess, why he was able to buy half the place out and just turn it into a surveillance society.
Is there any information about what the citizens of this place have done after they moved away, like after production shut down? Like, where are they today?
It's a good question. The legend is, and I don't know, the legend is that after filming they burned the set down. So no one's still living at the set. The set doesn't exist anymore. But that's why it's also a museum exhibit. It's not just the film that they were able to capture there. It's also the entire experiment of making the film. So I don't know. If anyone listening lives in Paris and happened to have gone to this exhibit, I'd love to hear about it. So hit us up with an email, info@wisecrack.co.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on. Oh, actually, sorry. Let's run the trailer of the movie, of the experience.
In 2009, over 400 people left their everyday lives to go back in time to the Soviet Union. Ordinary street cleaners, barmaids, families, famous artists, Nobel Prize-winning scientists, and notorious criminals. Cut off from the modern world, for over 2 years they lived and worked at the secret research institute. Finding themselves in a familiar but strange world, people became open to new discoveries, personal and scientific. They fell in love, betrayed their friends, cheated on their lovers, ran experiments, grew old, had children, were arrested, and lost everything. They traveled through 3 decades, ending up in 1968, changed forever. Over 700 hours of their real reactions to these extraordinary circumstances have been captured. 13 feature films and a slate of series have been created. The experiment is ongoing. Now, a new way to experience the Institute is being developed.
So apparently this never happened. The
Get as
Berlin,
close as
Paris,
you want.
London thing didn't happen in 2018. It got delayed till beginning of 2019, where it actually happened earlier this year. Just in Paris, though.
I amend my earlier assessment. I do see the brilliance in this.
I mean,
I
I
think
want to go. It's super interesting, right?
Yeah.
It is. You know what's another sort of interesting connection to make is that, so in the Soviet Union, like the people who were living nice and comfortably were often like the high-ranking government officials. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was like a cash grab for as much, like it was just anarchy, like who owns what. But those high-ranking government officials were the ones who were able to like seize a bunch of stuff as like their own private companies now. So I wonder if that billionaire, so it's almost like the son of that billionaire is maybe a billionaire because of being like a petty tyrant during the Stalinist era.
I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I assumed. I assume all Russian billionaires are just crony capitalists from the fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then we're going to go on to Serby's next segment, Cult of Personality Test. Please tell us.
There's an article in Mel magazine about the rise of workplace personality tests. So according to the article, in 2016, 60% of companies worldwide used some sort of psychometric assessment in hiring, organizing, and developing staff. Some organizations live and breathe personality tests, and they dole out offers based on results. But researchers are fairly united in the belief that these assessments are unreliable. The Myers-Briggs test, for example, is really popular. I think they give it in high school, college, and oftentimes in the workplace.
And people are obsessed with it, like personally.
They are, yes. They identify as their 4-letter indicator type. But it has received quite a bit of scrutiny, with one researcher remarking, there is no evidence to show a positive relation between MBTI type and success within an occupation. And personality tests oftentimes upset job applicants because they know that the results can determine whether or not you receive an offer. So some have successfully sued organizations based on privacy concerns or violating federal discrimination laws. Now, I enjoy personality tests as a fun, fleeting diversion and as a tinder to spark conversation. However, I strongly believe that they don't have a place in the workplace. They don't have a role in determining hiring, developing, or organizing staff. I've had to take personality assessments as part of hiring processes, and anytime I've had to do that and I've accepted job offers at these organizations, I've always found that there are underlying like cultish or strange cultural practices. And I think it's like a great way, like for me as a job applicant, to weed out the organizations I don't want to work for based on whether or not they require a personality test. So have either of you taken these assessments?
I think a long time ago for a restaurant job I might have worked in, and I remember that one seemed to be like weeding out if you would steal things. Like it would ask questions like, if a coworker stole a fork, would you tell your superior?
Yeah.
I mean, I put yes because I know that's what they wanted.
Yeah, I've taken these before in a job, and I always thought it was bullshit. Just for the basic reason that I don't think human beings are too complex to be able to be quartered off into 4 different or 8 different categories. You know, we were talking about online dating earlier. I've even seen back in my online dating days that was like INTG looking for an ENTP. It's like, give me a fucking break. It's way too prescriptive. And I don't know, like, it's just obviously bullshit.
Yeah, the thing in that article that I loved was that researchers had people take personality tests multiple times, and often they would score entirely different personalities based on the day they took it.
Exactly.
But Jared, I think you have a story about someone who made you take a personality test.
Yeah, he's sitting right across from me. About, like 10 years ago now, I was Jacob, my co-founder in the company. I was his intern, and he made me take one of those tests to see how good I would be at doing various things for the company. And I told him back then that this was bullshit, and he didn't believe me. But I don't want to talk too much shit about him since he doesn't have a microphone in front of him. You hear this? Fuck you!
I took one personality assessment in business school, and it wasn't just like, oh, are you extroverted or are you a feeling or an intuitive person? It really dissected who you are in different situations. So one thing that struck me was it talked about like how inclusive you are. So I rank very high on wanting to include people in things, but I don't care to be included. So if people do things without me, it doesn't bother me at all, but I feel a strong need to include others. So I think that was the only time when I took a personality assessment that I was interested in and thought there was some value to it. But it was like this professional level personality assessment that I think costs like $700 to take.
God.
So I don't think it's widely available.
I used to work for a psychologist. He didn't do a personality test, but because he was a psychologist, he would essentially invent his own. And I wouldn't say his method was bullshit, but
why not?
Like one of the questions, well, because maybe. So there could be not necessarily there are like tests, not necessarily for personality, but like that can divulge psychological information. Like this is when like kids take tests all the time to figure out if they have some kind of like something wrong with them or they have ADHD or something like that. Those tests exist, right? And they're like scientific tests, like people have researched them and determined this is the way you do it. So my best case scenario is like he's got these principles in the back of his head that he's messing with. But like I just remember the one question was like, what drives you? And it threw me off. And I remember after I had been working there, someone interviewed, and I think they were an intern because I knew them, and they're like, dude, he asked me the weirdest questions. Like he's asking me like what my life mission is and like what my purpose is, and like, it was really like a existential mindfuck. And I mean, I don't remember what I said. I remember lying because it's kind of like, why do you want this job? I want this job because I want the money, right? Like nobody wants to be an intro level marketing coordinator for whatever bullshit you're doing.
Yeah.
One time, somebody asked me if you were if you were Mexican food, what kind of Mexican food item would you be?
They're all the same.
Oh, if it's
they're just
taco,
different
you're
configurations
fired.
of tortillas and.
And what did you say?
I think I said something stupid. Like, I think I laughed and said something like, "Are you serious?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then I was like, "I don't know, like a tostada." And they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Because
why would you ask that question?
Yeah, it's like there's like a bunch of parts of me, and that's what a tostada is." And that was like the end of it.
I think I'm a chimichanga because I'm more obscene than a burrito.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk about. So I don't know if you guys saw, but over this past weekend, the new Adam Sandler movie called Murder Mystery was released, and on Monday, Netflix had an article out that said it was a Netflix only movie, by the way, that Something like 31 million people saw it, which would translate to something like a $200 million box office opening, which is pretty much unheard of for anything that isn't a comic book movie these days. And so I watched the movie. It's the first Adam Sandler movie I've seen in a while, and I know that people like to shit on him, and the movie was not good, but it was a movie. The thing that was weird about the movie to me, well, first of all, I want to hear, what was the last Adam Sandler movie you guys saw, and what do you think his appeal is? Because certainly I think he's got an appeal, probably not in the coastal elite cities, but probably more in middle America. I think he's got a big international following. I think his comedy translates overseas a lot. But where do you guys think the discrepancy between how he's known in the U.S. and how he's known abroad is? I don't know.
What
was the last Adam Sandler movie you saw?
I was trying to think. I can't remember the name. It's the one where he's with Drew Barrymore and she has
50
amnesia.
First Dates. I think that's the last one I saw. Oh wait, no, I saw. Was Click after? Is that movie Click about the remote control changes time?
I think it's before. It's roughly the same era. Either way, it's like that's a long time ago. It's almost like 18 years ago or something. Yeah,
I've not seen one in a very long time, and I used to really like him. I had every version of the Hanukkah song that he'd ever written on my computer. But yeah, I kind of have this theory, and I think we brought this up before about why comedy's not doing well, at least domestically, at the box office, and it's because often comedy is culturally specific, and so for something to translate to multiple markets, including China, it has to be as bland as possible. And that's kind of what Adam Sandler is.
Yeah, there is something about this movie, though, in that they play up the folksiness of not only him, but also Jennifer Aniston. The premise is that she's a hairdresser and he's a cop, and they're constantly talking about how broke they are, and then somehow they get invited onto a multi-billionaire's yacht, and then the patriarch of the family gets killed because he was about to write his kids out of his will, and it's like a murder mystery that ensues. Now, the awkward thing about watching this is that throughout the movie, you're always reminded how baroque Jennifer Aniston and Adam Sandler are, and how they're just super folksy, and then all the rest of the people that surround them are all these kind of snobbish, very wealthy people. But the reality is, when you're watching this, it's like, okay, so of all these people on this yacht, the only people who actually could afford a yacht are Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston. I mean, they are some of the richest people in Hollywood. Jennifer Aniston, just off of Friends reruns, probably makes $10 million a year. Maybe that's even low. I don't know. These people are so wealthy, and so it is one of those weird things where people are able to tap into a folksiness that doesn't really exist, but they're able to just, I don't know. It was very weird for me. And first of all, Adam Sandler phoned it in. Jennifer Aniston was actually quite good. She played kind of the frazzled hairdresser quite well. Adam Sandler, though, he wasn't even doing the funny voices. His whole shtick was that he was an old, hungry man, and I don't care about this bullshit. I'm hungry. Where's the food? And it just seemed like
Jared. So he's Jared.
He's me, but yeah, I don't know. It was weird because it's not you couldn't even say that Adam Sandler making funny voices translates or making funny faces, because he wasn't doing either one of those. He was an icon for the American everyman, and I don't really know why it works on people. Having said that, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It was a movie.
It was a movie.
Yeah.
I wasn't, when all those Sony hacks happened, all those emails revealed about how just all the bullshit of making Adam Sandler movies and how nobody thought they were actually good. Didn't that happen?
I don't even think he thinks they're good. I'm even pretty sure that in his stand-up special on Netflix, which is called 100% Fresh, is all about, he's like, hey man, I make shitty movies, but guess what? They make a shit ton of money, and all my friends, guess what? Their kids are in private school because I'm making movies that make money. Which I get, man. Think about it. I mean, David Spade, all those guys, because of Adam Sandler, they're living good lives. And I do think there's value in that.
I think Adam Sandler is a hero of mine. He makes low quality work and doesn't care and gets to travel all over the world with his friends. I think it's fantastic. Good for him.
For sure. His life is good, and if he's bringing joy to people and doing good to the people that he likes, more power to him, right?
Sure.
Well, why not?
No, I don't. I can't just. I mean, yeah, I think you're maybe possibly right, but I haven't even seen the movie, so I don't want to hate on them necessarily. But I've seen some pretty crappy and some pretty great Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah, this is as bad as the bad Adam Sandler movies, but he's not making funny faces or not doing any weird voices, which makes it just kind of like bleh. But whatever. All right, let's move on to our last thing, fake influencers. I think this is you, Alec.
It is me. So there's a New York Times article. There are completely computer-generated influencers on Instagram now. They have music videos. This is from the New York Times article. So there's one of them is named Lil Miquela, who has 1.6 million Instagram followers, is a computer-generated character introduced in 2016 by a Los Angeles company backed by Silicon Valley money. She belongs to a growing cadre of social media marketers known as virtual influencers. Each month, more than 80,000 people stream Lil Miquela's song on Spotify. It's interesting. What the article kind of brings up is that first of all, when I went on her Instagram, it's kind of weird, horrifying, uncanny valley stuff. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is more or less already true, even without the computer-generated graphics. Because when it brought up the Spotify thing, I immediately thought of Milli Vanilli, which people watching this may not remember, but they were a band that got very famous. They did that song, I think, Girl, You Know It's True. But they were lip syncing the entire time. They were essentially figureheads for the actual creative talent behind it. This is not quite the same example, but like the Gorillaz is a great band with talented people, Damon Albarn, and they have sort of computer generated avatars. But I think the point that it all gets to is that all influencers are fake. So what does it matter if it's the fakest of the fake?
Before we go on, Serby, do you need to leave?
I do, yes. And I'm so happy that I got to chat with all of you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Serby.
Do you want to Alec, you want to just finish up this last point, let Serby sign off, and then we'll just finish it up?
Yeah, we can finish it up. The only thing I have to, these are just bullet points. Hugh Porn got into the trend with Jetty Vallis, an avatar who promotes the site and interacts with its users. The Chinese government's media outlet introduced a virtual news anchor, saying it can work 24 hours a day. Obviously, no labor laws to violate there. Mm-hmm. We can just leave it there if Serby has to go.
Yeah, well, Serby's already gone. I'll just say, we can maybe pick this up. Oh, you're still there. Okay. We could pick this up next time. All I'll say is that Joy, our producer, sent me some of those images. They don't really look that real to me. I don't think they're 100% there yet. But anyway, all right, guys, we went a little bit long. We started a little bit late. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to send us a voicemail, 213-534-8807 or 21-ELFGUT07. I want to thank Serby and Alec for joining me. Thanks, guys. Let you guys know this will be on RSS starting next Saturday. Next Saturday, we're going to be doing this weekly, Wednesday, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific, or if Serby has other plans, Friday, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. Bye-bye.